The jungle holds its breath. Water drips from a canopy so thick that daylight arrives only as rumor. Somewhere beneath the ferns, the mud shifts. Not from wind, not from rain, from something breathing. For a long moment, nothing moves. Then 40 feet of muscle uncoils from the shadow, and the river itself seems to flinch. This is not myth. This is not a monster invented for the screen. 34 million years ago, this animal was real. It swam through the same rivers that still cut through South America today, in a world so warm that crocodiles sunbathed at the edge of the Arctic Circle. And today, we are going to ask a question paleontology has never dared to answer. What if it never left? To understand what could have survived, we first have to understand what actually lived. In the swelter of the Paleocene, 5 million years after an asteroid ended the age of dinosaurs, the planet did something strange. It got hotter. Equatorial temperatures soared past anything the tropics see today. And in that furnace, reptiles did not just survive. They became giants of scale and coil. Titanoboa cerehonensis, over 40 feet long, more than 1.5 tons of solid muscle, a skull built to swallow crocodilians whole. It did not hunt with venom or speed. It hunted with patience, and a grip that could stop a heart mid-beat. It ruled a world without competition, because no cold-blooded animal could grow that large, unless the world itself was an oven. Heat was not comfort for this creature. Heat was the engine that let its muscles fire, its digestion run, its enormous body simply exist. And then the oven turned off. Around 34 million years ago, Earth's climate broke. Global temperatures dropped sharply. Ice began forming at the poles for the first time in tens of millions of years, and the endless tropical belt that giants like Titanoboa depended on began to shrink. For a reptile, this was not inconvenient. It was a death sentence. Being cold-blooded at that size meant needing constant heat just to move, hunt, and digest. As the margins of the tropics cooled, the giants at the edges vanished first. But here is the question that keeps paleontologists up at night. Extinction records are built from what we have found, not from what still hides, undiscovered, in the parts of the world we have barely explored. So tonight, we do not follow the fossil record. We follow a possibility, somewhere deep in the heart of the Amazon basin, the one place on Earth that never fully lost its ancient furnace. A small population held on. Picture it. Not a triumphant survival, but a desperate one. A shrinking pocket of true tropical warmth, walled in by cooling forests on every side. A handful of Titanoboa, cut off from every other population on the planet, with nowhere left to retreat to but inward. Isolation like this is exactly how evolution accelerates. With no way to migrate, the only path forward is to adapt or vanish. Generation by generation, the giants change. Individuals that ran slightly leaner, needed slightly less heat, tolerated slightly cooler nights. They are the ones who leave offspring. Over hundreds of thousands of years, the population does not just survive the cooling, it is forged by it. The 42-foot titan of the Paleocene begins, slowly, to disappear, replaced by something leaner, faster, and far more dangerous per pound. It is not a straight line. There are setbacks. Entire seasons where the population barely holds its numbers, where a single, unusually cold year could have ended the lineage completely. Survival, at this stage, is never guaranteed. It is only ever narrowly won. But shrinking to survive the cold creates a new problem. It now has to compete for the crown. The Amazon basin, even in its diminished tropical core, was never empty. Giant caimans, armored and ambush-built, already ruled these rivers. For a smaller, evolving serpent, sharing territory with an apex predator wearing bone armor is not a peaceful arrangement. This is where our speculative Titanoboa is forced to specialize. Instead of contesting the open rivers, it pushes into the flooded forest floor, the tangled root systems, the black water channels too narrow for something built like a tank. It becomes an ambush hunter of shadow and root, not open water, trading size for stealth and raw power for precision. A hunter that does not need to win every fight, only the ones it chooses. By the time humans arrive on this continent, this animal would already be a legend with teeth. rarely seen, deeply respected, perfectly hidden. Now fast forward the simulation all the way to today. By 2026, our surviving lineage would likely have stabilized around 20 to 25 feet, still a colossus among snakes, but no longer the physics-defying giant of the hothouse Paleocene. Modern oxygen levels alone would have forced that correction. The ancient world's thicker atmosphere partly explains how the original Titanoboa reached the size it did. In this imagined Amazon, our serpent occupies a role no living snake truly fills. An apex ambush predator at the very top of the aquatic food web, contesting territory with jaguars at the river's edge and caimans in its depths. Not always winning, but never ignored. It would be an animal shaped entirely by pressure, cooling pressure, competitive pressure, and eventually, a pressure far more dangerous than any ice age. Picture a wildlife survey team tracking radio signals through flooded forest at dawn, picking up a heat signature far too large for any known anaconda. Picture river communities passing down warnings about a stretch of black water no one fishes alone. This is what a real apex predator looks like in the modern world. Not a spectacle, but a quiet, permanent negotiation with everything living around it. Every predator that has ever crossed paths with humanity has faced the same reckoning, and our surviving giant would be no exception. Indigenous communities of the Amazon basin, who have coexisted with anacondas for thousands of years, understand something the rest of the world often forgets. Enormous predators and human settlements can share a landscape, as long as that landscape has room for both. Respect, distance, and deep local knowledge have always been the real survival strategy, for the animal and for the people living beside it. Our speculative Titanoboa, elusive and forest-bound by evolution, would likely have followed that same quiet pattern, a legend more often heard about than seen, its existence known through story and footprint long before it was ever confirmed by science. And this is where the story turns. For 34 million years, this lineage survived the one thing that should have erased it, a global cooling event that ended an entire era of giants. It out-adapted an ice age, but the modern Amazon is no longer shrinking because the planet is cooling. It is shrinking because it is being cut down. Deforestation has already stripped away vast stretches of the basin, fragmenting exactly the kind of unbroken, humid, ancient forest a species like this would depend on to survive. And rising global temperatures, the same climate system that once nearly extinguished this lineage in reverse, are now destabilizing the very rainfall patterns that keep the Amazon a rainforest at all. The animal that outlasted an ice age would find itself undone, not by cold, but by the disappearance of the one refuge that ever let it survive the cold in the first place. 34 million years of resilience, undone in a couple of centuries. Titanoboa never got the chance to prove any of this. As far as the fossil record tells us, that ancient furnace world giant vanished with the world that made it possible. But the story we just told is not really about a snake. It is about what it takes to survive deep time, patience, isolation, and just enough warmth to hold on. And it is a reminder that the forests still standing today are not just scenery, they are refuges. The last unbroken warmth on a cooling, and now warming, planet. Somewhere out there, real animals are making that same desperate trade our imagined giant once made. Adapt, shrink, hide, endure. The question worth asking is not whether a 42-foot serpent could have survived to 2026. It is whether the forest it would need will still be there.